So today, in our third chapter of learning about artificial intelligence in gaming through Unity, we're going to learn about behavior trees. And we're going to use a software package or a Unity asset called Behavior Bricks. It's a really simple tool for dragging and dropping AI behaviors. It takes a lot of the heavy lifting out of your hands, and it does all the work for you. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take an existing, like a little maze here, and this is all comprised of cylinders, and we're going to have our little cube here chase our sphere. So it's just going to take a second to load. All right, and as you can see, the cube is moving around, and the sphere it's chasing down the sphere. The sphere changes position every 1.5 seconds or 2 seconds or so. So you're going to see the sphere change. There you go. It's popping somewhere else, and it's going to move toward the cube's going to move towards it. Now notice a couple of things. One, it's going around the walls. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing to notice is that the behavior of the cube, if you stare at it for a bit, it's actually wandering. So there's actually a wandering feature built in to Behavior Bricks. So it actually does the wandering that we talked about weeks ago when we tried to implement our own wandering behavior. So they've taken care of that inside Behavior Bricks for a more natural movement. So this is our goal for today. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a project that basically has the cube, the sphere, and the walls, and we're going to work with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take away this project. All right, so our first step right now is to actually install Behavior Bricks. Now, Behavior Bricks also requires one other thing. It requires NavMesh, interestingly enough. So last video, we talked about how to install and use NavMesh. Well, we have to bring it back into our project. So if you need to understand where NavMesh is, please refer to the last video in order to download and install NavMesh. Now, assuming you've been following properly, all you have to do is bring in, if you recall from last video, the one folder called NavMesh components. And so all you do is copy and paste that into your project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that in right now. So what I'll do is I'll just take something in my scene, just go show an explorer. And got it right here. So this is inside Explorer for my current project. I'm just going to take NavMesh components from another project, copy and paste it here. All right, and there it is. I'm just going to close this. It's going to be thinking. While it's thinking, I'm going to bring up the page, the asset store page for Behavior Bricks. So this is Behavior Bricks. So it's in the asset store. You can search for it. This is one we're going to use today. And I've already downloaded it, but go ahead and download and install it, and then hit open in Unity. And we're going to use the package manager to bring it into our project. So this is what it looks like in case you're searching for it. You need to download it and bring it in. All right. So now once it's done bringing in NavMesh, we're going to switch over to the package manager and work on bringing this thing in now. All right, so now that it's done bringing in NavMesh, so you can see NavMesh is ready to go there, we're going to go to our window and our package manager. And I already have Behavior Bricks right here. And I can see the Behavior Bricks asset store definition import here, information here. Now the trick is to download and import it. I've already downloaded it in a previous project, so I'm just going to hit the import button and let it do its thing. There it is, decompressing. And we'll just fast forward a bit because it will take a bit of time. All right, so I'm just going to hit import. And let it do its thing. It'll take a bit of time to download and install. So let's fast forward. I'm going to pause the recording just to let it fast forward, and so you're not sitting through this entire thing. But as a reminder, you have to, of course, download and install it. I'm just jumping straight to import because it's already I already downloaded it in the past. You still have to quote unquote purchase it, through the asset store, even though it's free. And once you all done all that, we'll reconvene after. All right, it looks like it's done. So I'm going to close up the package manager window. And what we want to do first is we want to take our scene here, and we're going to start off with doing our nav mesh stuff first, which is really simple. We're just going to bake our scene here. But to do that first, we have to go to navigation and bake, object. Click on, so click on, we have to click on all of our walls here. So they're all cylinders, they're all under the game object walls. So I'm gonna control click, multi-select all of my cylinder objects. All right, and in the last tutorial, we used a terrain. This time I'm just using a simple plane. So everything there is going to be checked off as navigation static. All right, and making sure it says walkable. All right, so now I want to bake this. So I'm going to click on the bake button here, and I'm going to hit bake. And it's going to take about an hour and a half to 2 hours in this implementation, and based on my computer that I'm using right now, take about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Depends on your computer, depends on what you have set up for your implementation. Even if you have maybe more heavier duty example, it might take longer than that for all we know. But what it's doing in Bake, just to remind you, is that NavMesh is calculating all possible paths in this little maze that I've created here. So what you may want to do now is go grab a coffee, grab some lunch, whatever, and pause the video and wait till your baking is done. Come back and then we'll continue on. All right, so that baking process took about 6 or 7 hours in my case, as opposed to the 1 to 2 hours I was just telling you about a moment ago. I guess one thing to note when you're baking something in NavMesh, close as many processes as possible. I had things that I needed running, such as the screen capture program to record this lesson. But you know, if you can close as many processes as possible, close your browsers, close anything that you don't need so that you can speed up the process. That's really what it's all about. So anyway, suffice to say, we finally have our area baked. All our paths are created. You can see here the blue paths that we're talking about here. So that's the beauty of it. It's gonna navigate around these areas, and you see the graph that's the tree that's already built in. So you can see that these are the paths that it'll take. So we have here this script called NPCMover, and basically it's the same script that we created from the last project. The idea is that it's going to randomly place a target, an object, so NPC target in this case, in different spots based on the range here. So what we do is we actually create a random.range for the x between -7 and 5, and random.range for -19 and 4 for the z. And we're keeping y at 1 always. We're keeping hard coding y equals 1 for height. These are numbers I measured out physically by going to the inspector and seeing what they were. So I actually, where my mouse pointer is right now, I actually physically measured these out. So whatever maze you have, you want to double check that your numbers match accordingly here. And the idea here is that we're going to move our target position to this new randomly generated location every 1 second, or every 5 seconds. So in this case, we're using a method called invoke repeating, calling a method called next waypoint, which is actually this, and then we're just basically going to repeat it every 5 seconds. So it's going to start after 1 second, and then it'll be repeating every 5 seconds. So we already have this. It's already attached to our cube. It's already connected up to our cube, and we have our sphere, which is the target that's already dragged into it. So now that we have this up and running, what we need to do now is set up our behaviors. So now we're going to move over to behavior bricks. And to do that, I'm going to open up window. And you see here behavior bricks editor. So assuming you've already installed it, everything's up and running nicely. But this is the editor window that pops up, and usually you would attach it to some place, but it's a pretty big window, and you need all that space. So I'm going to leave it like this. I'll be closing and opening it over and over again in this case. So you'll notice that it actually has two areas. So this is sort of our inspector area, and this is our editor area essentially. And you have here 4 buttons here. So collection, so you can create separate collections of behaviors or separate trees essentially for the behaviors you want to do. All right, and then there's node, which actually when you click on a node that we're going to have here, you can actually edit it. So it's like the editor portion of that node. Behavior, what behavior is it attached to, right? What collection is it attached to? And Blackboard basically handles variables. So you can have variables that can interact with the different behaviors. And so you would see those variables listed out in Blackboard. So our first thing to do in collection is to create a new behavior. All right. And it's going to ask us for a location. So I'm going to put it, actually I'll leave it here. I'm just going to call it wander. Right? It's going to wander around. Let's call it wander. And hit save. And you notice that it's generated this wander right here, and it's changed the editor area to actually be like a grid-like structure so we have something to work with. So now let's add a new behavior. So I'm gonna, whenever you want to add a new behavior brick to your editor, just right click and you can search for what you're looking for. So I'm going to search for move, and I want to move to a particular game object. I want my cube to move to my sphere. So I'm going to click on move to game object, and there we have move to game object. And now you'll see that if I click on node, there are now settings here I can work with. So I want to set it up so it moves to my sphere. And you'll notice that by default, it's expecting it to enter some constant value. I don't want to hard code my value. I don't know what the value is going to be, so I want it to be based on another game object. So I'm going to change constant to Blackboard, right, to tell it that there's a variable I'm going to work with, and I'm going to give it a proper name. Instead of just target, let's call it wander target. All right, you can call it sphere, target, whatever you want, but give it a proper name. Hit create. Now we have a variable. All right, so now it's going to, based on the variable data, it's going to move to that location. All right. Now, for now, you'll notice that this is all we're going to do right now, right? We have a simple behavior tree of one object, which is good enough to get started. So I'm going to close this, and I want to bring this up, bring this operational. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my hierarchy, click on cube, and I'm going to add a new component below NPCMover script. And this new component is called behavior executor component. Right? Behavior executor component. Right? This will actually bring behavior bricks on behavior bricks is behaviors onto this particular cube. So the first thing to do is specify the behavior. Well, we just created a behavior called wander. Right? We created a behavior called wander. So let's click on the dot, and I'm going to click on wander. All right, so this is the one we created. All right, now you'll notice that there's something called behavior params. Because we created a Blackboard object called Blackboard variable called wander target, we have to specify what that is now. And our wander target will be our sphere. All right, and now we can go ahead and click run and see what happens. All right, now we're running it, but there's a problem, and you'll notice that one, the sphere is all over the place, right? It's all over. It actually is ignoring the walls that we have created, and the cube isn't really going anywhere. All right, and the problem is because we didn't add one important thing, which is to specify that the sphere is a nav mesh agent. So let's stop the playback here. We're going to go to our sphere, and we're going to add the component nav mesh agent. So I have nav mesh agent, and I'm going to leave the default settings as is. I don't really need to worry about those default settings. So this is good enough. Now let's give it a try again and see if this is going to work now. All right, and there you have it. You see here that I'm using the scene view to illustrate, but let me click away to something else. There we go. Now you can see it a bit better. The sphere moves, the cube follows. And you notice it's applying a bit of a wandering pattern there. So there's the sphere there again, and it should jump around to higher elevations as well. So give it a sec. There we go, much better. And then you notice it's going around the walls. All right. There we go. Now it's going to walk around the walls again, find its path. So we know that it's actually working. There we go. Okay, so that is just one simple behavior of just following. It actually has wandering built into it. Let's add a little bit more to it. Let's add a little bit of a challenge for our cube. So the cube actually has to start in random positions instead of, where it is, where it ends up. It's going to be thrown into some other location, and this way we'll build out our tree at the same time. So let's stop this. I'm just going to hit Control S to save my game here. All right, so now let's open up Behavior Bricks' editor. So I'm going to Window, Behavior Bricks, and Editor. Click on Wander. So this is our Wander. We just had the one move to game object that we had here so far. So now let's add to this thing and make it a big tree. So what we want to do is we want to have our game object move to another area and then move to this game object area here. So I'm going to add another brick. I'm going to type in move again. And this time I'm looking for move to position. All right, I'm going to put this about here. Now, what I want to do is I want to specify a position within a specific area. So I'm going to get a random value from the area. So I'm going to right click again and type in get. And I'm going to say get random in area. Okay, so I'm going to put this here. All right. And so the idea is that I'm going to get a random number or a random location in a specified area, basically inside our maze. I'm going to pass that to move to position so that it moves our cube to that particular position, and then it will do the move to game object. But I want there to be a bit of a delay. Okay, so I'm going to add one more brick here within this sequence. So I'm going to say wait for seconds. So I'm going to put that here. Okay, so this is basically the order in which things are going to happen. All right, so we'll say get random in area, then move to position, then wait for seconds, then move to game object. Now, in order to do a get random in area, if we look at the node behavior, it's looking for as an input, if I say blackboard here and add a new parameter, we'll call it wander area. Okay, now the thing with this wander area is that it actually needs some sort of area to work with here. So I'm just going to do a Control S. This stuff automatically saves anyway, but just for the back of my head, I'm just going to say Control S to save. I'm going to close this. What we're going to do is we're going to add something to this maze here, just an invisible game. Well, it'll be kind of invisible here. We'll do a quad. And I'm going to put this quad, I'm going to make its position be, just say 1, right? And the rotation, we'll say 90 degrees for X. Sorry, it'll be I think 90 degrees for Y. We have to basically get this thing to lay flat. Right now it's sideways. There we go. So the X was the correct one. All right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to stretch this out to be the size of the area here. I'm actually going to, so we're going to use the scale tool. Sorry, that's the rect tool. We're going to use the scale tool. There it is. And we're going to stretch it. It's going to cover the entire area. So that looks about good. I mean, we could stretch it a bit more. All right. Now, what I want is for this to be a little bit lower. Say 0.1 there. Right. So at least it's just below the walls. All right. But we basically have this quad. It does blend in with the floor, so it's okay. You may want to work on changing the material if you were using a different implementation, but this is good enough for now. All right, so this is our area here that we're going to work with, and you'll notice that if I click on cube, we have wander area, which is basically our new quad that we just dragged in here. All right, so now it'll base it on this area. Now let's go back. So I'm just going to save this, Control S to save, and then go back to my behavior bricks window or editor. Okay, click on wander again. Okay, so we have our, if I look at node, we have our wander area, it's specified. I want this thing to move to a position based on Blackboard, and I wanted to receive that position. Now, in order to do that, I also need to create an output parameter for get random in area. So I already have Blackboard random, but let's keep it as random position, hit create. Now I have here random position as another Blackboard area. If I go to Blackboard, you'll see that I have different variables. Random position is an out parameter. All right. So now I have my input wander area, my random position out area. If I click on move to position now, all right, its input will actually be the random position. So you're seeing that if I recap this, get random in area will get a random value within wander area, which we dragged and dropped our quad into, and it's going to produce an output value, all right, called random position. All right, move to position will now take that random position as input and actually move the cube to that random position. All right, I want it to wait for, let's say, wait for 2 seconds. All right, we'll wait for 2 seconds, then go on to move on to the game object. All right, now here's something interesting is that we have these bricks here, but they're all separate. And there's this letter R here in this corner that specifies this is the root brick. So that means this is the first brick that is ever executed. All right, now we don't want this to be the first brick right now because it'll basically just execute only this brick. We need to put this into a sequence object or a sequence brick. So I'm going to right click. Let's see if I can first off just drag this down so we have more space. Now I'm going to right click and look for sequence. So a sequence node. All right, so there's sequence. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect these up. So I'm going to connect this to here. All right. And then I'm going to connect this to here. I connect this to here. And then finally connect this to here. Now you notice that there's numbers here. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so it's going to run the sequence in this order, but it'll run the sequence once. I want the sequence to go over and over and over again. So I want to add one more brick called repeat. And it's actually called repeat decorator. So we have here repeat decorator. We're going to connect repeat decorator to sequence. Now you notice that repeat decorator now has the R, the root node. So it's going to execute this first and then go to sequence and then go to get random in area, move to position, wait for seconds, move to game object. Now if I click on repeat, it's saying -1, which means repeat forever. And its policy here is continue even when a child fails. So even if one of these child objects fails, just keep going over and over and over again. All right, so now we have a behavior tree for these two bricks. So it's going to repeat over and over again this sequence, which consists of get random in area, move to a position, wait for a couple of seconds, move to the game object. So let's hit Control S here just to be sure. Let's give this a run now. See what happens. And so there you have it. you notice that the cube was placed in a different position right away, and then at the same time that the sphere also was placed in a different position. And so now you have it. Now it's actually following it around. It's following the sequence, and so on. All right, so there you have it. This was our crash course into learning about trees, behavior trees, and learning how to use a particular asset, a free asset out there called behavior bricks. There's all kinds of AI assets out there. Some are paid, some are free, and this was a very good one. I like how it implemented wandering as well, and it looks a lot more realistic than the wandering we did a couple of videos ago. So it's a nice tool to have. All right, well, that's it for today. Don't forget to like, share with your colleagues, and look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial. All right, until then, take care and bye for now.